Did you notice at the bottom of the tree, there's a long word called predestination? The reason for that is when this gospel was first being developed in the 3rd and 4th centuries, everyone believed in predestination. God decides who's saved and lost. You don't have a voice in the matter. And for 1,000 years, that was the belief of most Christians, that we are either destined for heaven or destined for hell, with no choice in the matter. And what is very interesting is that although predestination has been dropped by most Christians, the gospel built on predestination is still the mainstream gospel. And if you look at it, it kind of fits. We're born sinners because of bad equipment. Jesus didn't sin because he had good equipment. We're forgiven for our bad equipment until Jesus comes. And then at Jesus coming, I guess Jesus is going to push a magic button in our brains and we won't sin anymore. In other words, bad equipment, sin; good equipment, no sin. End of discussion. Kind of fits with predestination.
How is his presentation of predestination?
Well, first of all, it jumped out at me, the whole you have no choice in the matter. You know, you're either destined for life or damnation. And what I tell people as somebody who does believe in the doctrine people typically think of as predestination, that God has chosen us to be in Christ before the foundation of the world. What I typically tell people is right now in real time, if you want to be predestined, if you want to be elect, put your faith in Jesus Christ and you will. But you can also have the comfort that if you do that, that this was not some accident, this was not some afterthought, that God has chosen you in him before the foundation of the world. The other thing I would say is that Adventists present this false dichotomy that you either believe in predestination or you don't. And really, that's not the issue. The issue is, how do you understand predestination? Because predestination is a scriptural word. We find it in Romans 8:30. We find it in, there you go, what we'd call the golden chain of salvation. Those whom he predestined, he also called, as it says in verse 30. In addition to that, we also find the word explicitly used in Ephesians 1. And so it's not a question of whether or not, as people who take the Bible seriously, we can believe in predestination. It's how we're going to understand it. And obviously, amongst true Christian believers, there's different understandings of that. But we can't just discard the concept and say it's unbiblical, because it clearly appears in the Bible.
Took the words right out of my mouth. That's why I already had it brought up. Sorry, Dennis. It's there. It's part of the chain of salvation. You can't just outright dismiss it. This is typically where SDAs are going to falsely assert, that's Calvinism, as though John Calvin novelly came up with predestination. No. Right. You can't just whole cloth throw something out. There's been discussions around the mechanics of that, etc. But he's sort of presenting this idea of like, well, it's not even a thing at all. I mean, except it's literally part of the chain of salvation. But I want to note before getting into his next portion here, we still haven't actually heard the gospel. I've heard a lot of theological disagreements, but not the gospel. Remember that, folks.